A few years ago, an uncanny incident occurred with my close friend, who I will call Tom. It was an average evening, imbued with the air of suspense as we were both 15 and fresh from watching a marathon of horror movies at Tom's abode. Engulfed by a restless desire for an adventure, we decided to explore the neighborhood late at night. Just a stone's throw away from Tom's house stood an eerie demolition site, a desolate block of derelict houses in a state of severe disrepair. They were doomed to be razed 2 days hence, in a drastic attempt by the local government to replace the decrepitude with shiny new residences. The area was encircled by a tall, foreboding fence, adorned with chilling warning signs that sternly prohibited any form of entry. These dilapidated houses, their doors and windows firmly barricaded with thick wooden planks, presented a morose picture of abandonment. Intrigued by this gloomy spectacle, Tom and I decided to tour this ghostly block and capture some chilling snapshots for our thrill-seeking selves. Armed with a digital camera, we approached the block. As we roamed the desolate streets, we noted the staunchly secured doors and windows, their defenses impervious to any attempt at intrusion. However, our curiosity was piqued by a single house, its upper window not as fortified as the rest. A small gap allowed us a peek inside. Capturing this curious sight with our camera, we ventured back home, the adrenaline gradually subsiding. Our hearts pounded as we scrutinized the pictures we had taken. Upon encountering the photograph of the weakly barricaded window, our blood ran cold. There, in the grim room, stood a woman clad in a brown raincoat. Her skin, a startling white, contrasted sharply with her long, flowing black hair. The sadness etched on her face was palpable, chilling us to our cores. We hadn't seen any such woman during our nocturnal escapade, a fact made all the more terrifying considering the impenetrable boards securing the house. Compelled by this shocking revelation, we found ourselves returning to the eerie house, intent on investigating this apparition. To our horror, our initial observations held true. The house remained locked tight, no sign of life within. Yet, the image of the woman persisted in our photograph, an unresolved mystery that still haunts us to this day. This chilling tale belongs to my Japanese friend, whom I'll refer to as Kenji for the sake of the story. The disturbing events transpired when Kenji was merely an innocent child of 11 or 12. Possessing a magnetic charm, Kenji was no stranger to the flattery of his peers. However, a certain admirer stood out among the crowd, a girl named Yumi, who was significantly older at 17. Yumi lived just down the street and was merely an acquaintance to Kenji. He hadn't paid her much attention until her behavior began to change drastically. Yumi started to follow Kenji everywhere, whether it was in person or tracking his online activities, slowly transitioning from an innocent admirer to a relentless stalker. Kenji's unease began when Yumi started bombarding him with messages, frequently exceeding 20 a day. Messages ranged from seemingly caring texts like, "Be safe," "Are you alright," "Sleep well," etc., to more disturbingly personal observations such as, "You should eat your lunch," if he missed a meal, or, "I think your sister is hungry," when his younger sibling was upset. This unnerving invasion of his privacy led Kenji to abandon his phone and social media altogether. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. With his mother frequently away, Kenji was often cared for by babysitters. One day, Yumi was introduced as the new babysitter. Kenji noticed that Yumi seemed to get exceptionally close to his mother, which he found unsettling. One day, Yumi informed Kenji at school that his mother would be out of the country for a week, insisting that he stay at her house as per his mother's instructions. Although hesitant, Kenji respected his mother's wishes and agreed to Yumi's proposition. Things took a turn for the worse when Kenji arrived at Yumi's house to find her parents absent. Kenji's account of the ensuing days becomes clouded by fear as he recalls Yumi forcing him to partake in unsettling games such as Family, where she insisted on playing the wife to his husband, and others that involved leaving him alone and blindfolded for hours. 5 days into his stay, with Yumi away at her part-time job, Kenji was confined to her house with locked doors and unreachable windows. He sat glued to the TV, only to be met with a horrifying news report, his own missing persons report. Before he could react, Yumi appeared, swiftly turning off the TV, leaving Kenji frozen in terror. Frightened and desperate, Kenji managed to break free from Yumi's grasp, open a window, and cry out for help. His calls for aid were fortunately heard by a passing couple, who promptly contacted the police. Within the hour, law enforcement officers arrived to find Kenji bound and blindfolded in Yumi's bedroom. Given his status as a minor, Kenji was uncertain of the consequences Yumi faced. His last memory of her was seeing the police take her away as his mother embraced him tightly. In the aftermath, Kenji relocated to Australia, leaving behind the traumas of his past. However, he still recoils at the mere mention of Yumi's name, a testament to the haunting impact of his experiences. About half a decade ago, I was residing in the heart of a major U.S. city. As a nocturnal individual, I often found myself restlessly awake while my roommate, who had different sleeping habits, was already in the land of dreams. In order to keep myself engaged, I indulged in long, solitary walks that served as food for thought. Over the course of 4 years, I spent my nights wandering the city, and strangely, I never encountered a situation that would stoke fear in me. I would often humorously tell my roommates that even the city's drug dealers exhibited politeness. However, a single night dramatically altered this perception. It was a Wednesday, sometime between 1 and 2 in the morning. I found myself near a police-patrolled park that was a significant distance from my apartment. The night was unusually quiet, even for a weekday. There was minimal traffic, and pedestrians were virtually non-existent. The park, as was often the case, was deserted. In order to circle back to my apartment, I took a detour down a short side street. It was then that I spotted a man at the far end of the street. His silhouette was eerily performing what seemed like a dance. It was an odd dance, akin to a waltz, but concluded with an aggressive forward stride. This strange dance-walking man was advancing towards me. Assuming that he was possibly intoxicated, I moved as close to the road as possible, making room for him to pass. As he neared, I realized how effortlessly he was moving. He was notably tall and slim, donned in an old-fashioned suit. His facial features became discernible as he drew closer. His eyes were wide open, seemingly untamed, and his head was tilted back slightly as if gazing at the sky. His smile was unnaturally broad, giving off an eerie cartoonish vibe. Disturbed by his appearance, I decided to cross the street before he could approach any further. As I navigated the empty street to the other side, I dared to look back and instantly froze. The man had stopped his dance, standing with one foot on the street, his body perfectly parallel to mine. He seemed to be looking skyward while maintaining his creepy smile. Feeling unnerved and threatened, I resumed my walk but kept my eyes locked on the man. He remained stationary until I was about half a block away. Shifting my gaze momentarily to check the path ahead of me, I found it to be deserted. As I turned back, the man had vanished. A fleeting wave of relief washed over me until I spotted him again. He had crossed the street and was slightly crouched. Although it was hard to ascertain due to the distance and shadows, I was convinced he was facing me. He had covered the distance quickly, catching me off guard. I found myself standing still, eyes fixed on him. The man resumed his advance in an exaggerated tiptoe manner, reminiscent of a cartoon character sneaking, but with a quick pace. Under normal circumstances, I would have fled, or used my pepper spray or phone, but I was paralyzed with fear, unable to act as he approached me. He abruptly halted about a car's length away from me, maintaining his unnerving smile and upward gaze. When I managed to regain my voice, I blurted out a trembling, "What the fuck do you want?" What I had intended to be a commanding tone was reduced to a whimper. He seemed unaffected by my obvious terror, merely standing there with his chilling smile. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned around and began to walk away. I watched him retreat until he was nearly out of sight, only to realize that he had stopped moving further away. To my horror, the man's silhouette started growing bigger. He was heading back my way, but this time, he was running. I bolted too, not stopping until I reached a well-lit road with some traffic. Upon looking back, he was nowhere to be found. Throughout the remainder of my journey home, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being followed, expecting to see his disconcerting smile. Thankfully, he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 more months and never ventured out for a night walk again. His face continued to haunt me. He did not appear drunk or under the influence of drugs. He looked frighteningly insane, a sight that continues to terrify me to this day. In the mid-80s, my mother, Amelia, worked as a cleaning professional in Australia. She mainly cleaned suburban houses, occasionally extending her services to homes in rural or wine regions. She often advertised her business through local shops via business cards and relied heavily on word-of-mouth referrals. One day, Amelia received a call from an elderly-sounding woman, who was interested in having her old farmhouse cleaned. This woman had quite a few peculiar requests and, oddly enough, she didn't want to meet Amelia before she began her work. Instead, she promised to leave the keys under the front doormat. Despite the unusual circumstances, Amelia agreed to the job, primarily due to the woman's apparent wealth and the significantly higher compensation she offered. The cleaning job was scheduled for a Monday morning. Upon reaching the farmhouse, Amelia was struck by a sense of unease. The long, solitary driveway leading to the house, which was located in the middle of a vast, deserted property, only added to her apprehension. Nonetheless, she found the keys as promised and began her work. About an hour into the cleaning, she was startled by the sound of the back door shutting. Amelia had been assured that no one else would be in the house, so this unexpected noise left her feeling scared and vulnerable. She stood frozen in the kitchen, too frightened to move, for what she estimated to be 3 to 4 minutes, although it could have been longer. With no other vehicles in sight, she seriously considered leaving. However, she had 2 rooms left to clean, both of them bedrooms. As the silence stretched on, she decided to shake off her fear, assuming that the noise might have been caused by something falling rather than the back door. As she ascended the hallway and entered the first bedroom, her heart dropped. Scattered all over the bed were black and white photographs. Upon closer inspection, she was horrified to discover that every photograph was of her. Some had been taken at her family home, and others were snapped at different houses she'd cleaned, with some even taken through windows or over fences. Panic-stricken, Amelia immediately used the house phone to call the police and rushed to the safety of her car at the end of the driveway. The woman who owned the house was subsequently investigated, although she maintained that the house had been broken into. Despite the police's efforts, the investigation eventually reached a dead end. The unsettling incident prompted Amelia and our family to relocate to a different town 4 months later. At the age of 22, James experienced a chilling incident that he will likely never forget. This happened around 18 months ago when he had just started settling into his first apartment. The entrance door to his apartment had an automatic lock feature that activated once the door was closed. One day, while retrieving mail from the complex's entrance, James was engaged in a phone conversation with a friend. After collecting his mail, he returned to his apartment and sat on his bed to sift through it. In the midst of the conversation and opening his mail, he accidentally dropped his phone on the floor. It slipped under his bed. Lying on the floor and stretching to retrieve the phone, James noticed something truly shocking. There was a man hiding under his bed. The stranger was lying still, his back facing James and his head tucked into his chest, which made it impossible to see his face or for him to see James. As a flurry of thoughts bombarded him, James kept his cool, picked up his phone, and casually mentioned to his friend that he had dropped his phone and was about to take a shower. His bathroom was conveniently located next to his bed. After ending the call, he quickly walked into the bathroom, locked the door quietly, turned on the shower, and then made a daring escape through the bathroom window. Once safe, James immediately called the police, who advised him to wait nearby, preferably across the street, and observe if anyone left the apartment complex. Considering it was summer, it was still light outside, which provided James with a clear view of his open bathroom window and the building's entrance. While he was hiding behind a car across the street, he called his friend for emotional support. His friend arrived just as the police did. Handing his keys over to the officers, James watched as they entered his apartment. Within a few moments, they emerged with a gaunt, weary-looking man in their custody. The man's wild eyes were filled with a terrifying insanity, but he offered no resistance to his arrest. One of the officers stayed with James, offering comfort as the apartment was thoroughly searched. James was informed that the intruder had been waiting outside his bathroom with one of his kitchen knives, anticipating his return. It appeared the man had sneaked into the apartment while James was retrieving his mail and had hidden under the bed. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that the intruder was a homeless individual with severe mental health issues. As a result of the incident, he was committed to a mental health institution.